Welcome to the Artistic Foodies, the show that explores life through the lens of art and food. I'm Abbas Mohamed,
And I'm Irfan Rydhan.
and today we're talking with Preacher Moss about his comedy, community engagement, jazz music, and life philosophy. So make sure you listen all the way through.
Preacher Moss's unique style of comedy is a reminder of the lost old school art of comedy as protest and enlightenment. You may know him as the founder of Allah Made Me Funny, the official Muslim comedy tour from the early 2000s. As a writer for Hollywood heavyweights like Damon Wayans, George Lopez, and Daryl Hammond on Saturday Night Live, Preacher Moss has proven his value across many levels of stand up, activism, and community empowerment. Many have described his work as something akin to watching a veteran jazz musician fill in the scales with notes and ultimately make the world smile. Keep an eye out for his upcoming jazz comedy special entitled A Love Supreme. You're known as one of the OGs of the Muslim comedy scene, so we want to start off with getting a little bit background information, for all the youngsters out there, all the
I,
young
I, I
kids.
am I am the OG.
Yeah, you're the OG.
I am
Like,
the OG.
so tell us a little bit about how you got into comedy in the first place.
I fell into comedy, man. Just in high school. I think junior year, Eddie Murphy had come out, but I loved comedy for a long time. Red Fox, Richard Pryor, Bill Cosby, Mantan Moreland, Pygmy Markham, Moms Mabley, Nipsey Russell, Stephen Fetchit, all the way back, man. I've been a big fan of comedy, and my father was hilarious. My aunt was hilarious, and to be able to just kind of command the room. Um, per se, like family holidays, like Thanksgiving, everybody will wait for my father to show up. We're not gonna eat or anything like that. We're gonna. And my father's name he was a junior, so we were waiting for Junior to come through the door, and it was on then when he walked through the door.
He brought the vibe, he brought the energy.
Yeah, everybody knew it's gonna be some laughs up here now. And that was the vibe. I had an aunt that was hilarious. My aunt Ruth, may Allah be pleased with her. She taught me how to cuss uh, with rhythm, purpose, and creativity. And yeah, it comes in handy when you go to the roller derby. So yeah, I was out there. But comedy in terms of a profession, never. Comedy as a profession was almost like social work as a profession.
Hmm.
It seemed like we didn't know about social work. It's just if people needed help, you helped them. You know what I mean? So we have funerals. People will come up short for burial money. We pass the hat. You
Hmm.
take food to buy Christmas gifts. You always buy the extra Christmas gifts for people who may not have. So it was all this. It was a community understanding. So humor was a community understanding. So you would see guys on the corner. You see my dad on the corner or my uncle T on the corner holding court. We call it signifying,
Hmm.
talking crazy, lying, and everybody knew everybody was lying. It was just funny. Um, but I watched that as a kid, and just the ability to command. It had a lot to do with uh, having confidence in talking to people, being able to walk into rooms you don't know anybody, and you can figure out the vibe of the room. And pretty much, it's like you've made it comfortable for yourself, but you also make it comfortable for other people.
So you grew up in a environment where that's kind of like the way that your family was, joking around and things like that. But as you said, you didn't think about it as a career until
It was
later
like
on.
loving. It was like loving dysfunctionality. That's what it
Yeah. What did you actually like? What did you actually wanted to be when you were younger? Like, what did you like? You said you wanted to go to school to study a particular field, or what was your interest?
I had gotten accepted in high school. I got accepted for engineering, and then I ran into somebody who was in an engineering program, and I was like, "Oh, this requires a lot of math." and precise precision math. So the way I chose my college was all of these. I always wanted to go D1 because I played tennis. So I was like, I want to play tennis at a D1 school. I wanted a D1 education. So all these D3 schools had kind of, given me, they accepted me for engineering and stuff like that. Then I ran into a guy who was an engineer and he started telling me about it. And conceptually, I was like, wait a minute, you have to be very precise as an engineer. There are no engineers with a 2.2 GPA. You know what
That's
I mean?
right. That's right.
I'm like, the math they were talking about. I was like, I didn't take that in high school. I didn't take that. I didn't take that. So the last school was Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and they they were like, congratulations, you've been accepted. I'm like, yeah, but I didn't get accepted for my first choice, which was civil engineering. They took me for my second choice, which was journalism, which was a fluke.
Mm.
I just kind of checked the box. I didn't know what journalism
It's
really
so
was.
so different from engineering.
I didn't know what journalism really was uh, until I got there my freshman year, and I'm like, they talk a lot about newspapers and stories. So I kind of stayed in it because I love the whole idea of narrative and stories and being able to report stories. It probably one of the most pivotal decisions I made by accident, by default. That's largely been responsible for my comedy career. Allah made me funny, Muslim comedy. A lot of people don't realize that, an accident in terms of it not being an engineer but a journalist probably reframed or definitely texturized the landscape for Muslim comedy.
Wow, that's pretty interesting there. So, did you actually, when you finished school, did you actually do any kind of journalism jobs or anything?
I tried an internship. Um, I was already working at a group home, so I was trying to do an internship at while I was doing a group home thing. And the guy was like, either you have to give up the group home or do the internship. And I was like, well, you guys, this is a free internship, so I'm gonna do the group home. But the thing is really, really important. I was saying this to a friend of mine. What they don't tell you about journalism, you see all of the Fox News and the stuff like that now. That's not real journalism. Like nobody really does investigative journalism. Costs too much, takes too long. So what Marquette gave me was because I had a degree in broadcast journalism and I had a minor in film. I like film, but I didn't like to edit, so I never got it.
Hmm.
Because back in the '80s, editing was laborious, man. I mean,
No,
Should
the
you
yeah,
big
get editors
VT,
for?
there
Just
was
yeah,
no,
you had the big VTRs, and
there was all linear editing. There was
yeah, it
no,
was all linear. And it's like first thing we're gonna lay down black. Oh, that's 30 minutes in the editing lab, of just laying down magnetic tape. It was stuff like that. So I was scarred. I should have gone to therapy for editing if they had a support. But I think the thing was, um, I think in the '80s that was the last of the journalism schools that really taught journalism before you had 24-hour news cycles and things like that. And I've said this. I said, they people don't understand journalism. They think it's a news reporter. It's like literally the true journalism schools taught you how to write for every medium. So they taught you how to write for newspaper. They taught you how to write for radio. They taught you how to write for magazine. Taught you how to write for TV. They taught you all of these things, and that's how you got your journalism writing degree. And so when you get to comedy, you get to LA, you get to Hollywood, whatever, and you're watching these comedians. I only got to write for one person, and I don't
Hmm.
have to investigate. I don't have to do any investigation. They give me whatever I want is right there on the stage. Because you get to Hollywood and you realize, oh, it's all these funny guys, but a very small portion of those guys really know how to write. So the people that make the most money in Hollywood are the writers. You're
yeah,
gonna
Hmm.
yeah,
have
yeah.
anonymous. You're gonna have some aberrations like a Eddie Murphy, or Chappelle or Pryor, but it's few and far between. These days when somebody goes, oh, we think we can do a TV show around it, they pair you up with a writer because they don't believe that you can. Right.
So, is your journalism and writing skills what got you the writing gig for Saturday Night Live?
It got me through the door with Daryl Hammond, and Daryl Hammond was at Saturday Night Live, and he that's a whole nother story, bro. Um, that's a
Yeah,
heartbreak
we'll
story.
come back. We'll come back to that
It's
one.
a heartbreak story, but it's hilarious. But the journalism writing degree, when I got to LA, because I left Milwaukee to go to LA, and by that time I had a system. I would look at comedians and see how they put their sets together, and I'm like, if they weren't really good about narrative, you watch and see how they told a story. If they had to tell a story exactly the same way, chances are they weren't really good writers because they couldn't improvise. You know what I mean? It's
Mm.
story's not built out. So I used to sit back and watch writers, and I get that from working with jazz musicians. You watch jazz musicians. If you ever watch old jazz musicians, they'll watch a young guy get up on the mic and solo, "Ba-da-da-da-da-da," and they go, "Yeah, yeah, he's loud, but he can't read music." Uh,
Mm.
Journalism taught me how to read music in terms of looking at comedy. So it's like there's some guys that have that. Like Pryor had that. Um, Murphy had it. Cosby had it. Red Fox had it. Chappelle has it. But few and far between again. But all of those guys I mentioned, they grew around music. Miles Davis gave Richard Pryor his first start. Right? People don't know that.
Wow. So like jazz and comedy is really going hand in hand.
Yeah, people don't know that. I mean, Red Fox was a jazz singer before he was. He had an album. He had a recording contract. The great
That's
Red Fox was a
incredible.
singer. People used to watch
Wow.
him Stanford and sound like,
Yeah.
he sounded like he was a singer. Because back in the day, you just couldn't do comedy if you were the host. You come out the music, and he used to sing "Bye Bye Blackbird" and stuff like that. I know I'm dating myself, but I'm like, this is what it is.
Never
But
heard of that before.
in the old Apollo days, those guys would do 5 shows a day, man.
Yeah, and it's a lot of that transferable you're talking about, just like being in a room, being able to command that attention, being able to improvise. It's really just about the energy of the people, and like you're shifting energies, and hopefully
Yeah, yeah,
everyone
yeah,
leaves a little bit
yeah,
lighter than they were when they got there.
yeah. Because comedy is really aggressive now, so it's not really a whole lot of room for relationship comedy.
Yeah.
Guys got to get a laugh, and I got to get it caught on tape in this hour, this 45 minutes. Nobody really builds sets anymore like they used to. Uh,
Yeah.
well, it used to be you build a set, and guys build sets on tours. So they're gonna tour 15, 20 cities, and at the end of it, I'm gonna have the new set for the special. Dude, when you were building sets before you had, you had cable and things like that, you literally might be building a set for a year and
That's
a half.
yeah. That's so the comedy scene itself has changed over the last few decades.
It's very much about instant gratification, and the comedy consumer is very much about instant gratification. You
Mm.
know, we have very few comedians that we literally watch the trajectory of their careers. Um, and when I say that, I mean absence the industry, away from the industry. Like we see them in these spots. Like we see them in really, really bad open mic spots. It's not like a showcase at the club. It's like, no, I'm going to this spot. Nobody knows me. The sound is bad. The waitresses are disgruntled, and they're not paid well. And I'm gonna do this set. I did an album. I'm gonna release it called "Confessions of a Muslim Comedian." And the best part about it is it wasn't even set up to be recorded. Like I got a sound guy, and I'm like, we started listening. I was like, yo, there's something here.
Mm.
um, because I was doing that to warm up again, warming up because I was going to do Love Supreme. So I had to have a set or practice with a set with no music to be able to adapt it for a set with music. So working on timing, uh, key, voice, inflection, all of that. And it was interesting because it's literally a jazz set.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Glad that you
Want to thank
mentioned
everybody.
that, and then you mentioned Love Supreme. I definitely want to come back to that one and talk more about the jazzy because it's a very interesting corollary there. But real quick, I just want to ask you, like within the comedy scene, especially the Muslim comedy scene itself, we see a lot more people popping up now. 20 years ago, it's been 20 years since Allah Made Me Funny was launched. What
Hmm.
changes have you seen within the Muslim comedy scene, especially since then?
It's not really the Muslim comedy scene.
It's not.
It's not really the Muslim comedy scene. 2003, 2004, 2005. It was an engagement. Um, so I stopped doing comedy in the mainstream
Mm,
because you felt a call of duty, a sense of urgency.
mm,
You remember one thing, Muhammad? May Allah be pleased with him. When I came up with the idea, Allah made me funny. He thought it was great because it was still this fracture between the indigenous Muslim community and the immigrant Muslim community. And he made the point that we have a lot of scholars over here, people who studied. He said, but we can't get on these minbars over here and these communities, Pakistani, Indian, Arab. We can sit, but we have this knowledge, and this knowledge is very valuable for what was going on after 9/11. But when I talked to the higher ups about doing Allah Made Me Funny, he was like, yes, yes, you should do it. He said, but here's the caveat: don't start it in an indigenous Muslim community. Go over there and start it. And I'm like, hey, I'm like, because I didn't have a relationship with immigrant Muslims. I just didn't have one. And at times didn't really want one from all the years I've been touring and gone to these masjids and some of the treatment I had gone through. So some people were great, some people were really disrespectful. I'm just gonna be honest. I keep it 100%. Um, but the man was like, that comedy thing is different. And so he looks at it and goes, how many Muslim comedians we have? But I'm like, in my mind, I go, hey man, I'm look, I've been working with George. I'm touring with George Lopez. Wrote on the George Lopez show. Da, da, da. I said, I go over here. It's like starting over. And he looks at me. He goes, "Well, are you funny or not?" I'm like, "Oh yeah,
mm. Challenge accepted.
Well,
yeah." And I'm like, "Yeah," but I mean, I wrote my thesis about this whole thing. What you had Arab comedians that were very funny, Muslim comedians, but we served the moment, right? Because in 2001, 2, 3, you had Muslims afraid to go to the masjid. They were tired. They were scared. That pervasive thing of Islamophobia, uh, what was being put on us, what we were putting on ourselves. The whole world is against us. I'm like, no, go outside. People, you know, there are people that appreciate who we are, but they're not
Mm.
going to do it if we don't appreciate who we are. And so the comedy was much more purposeful. Uh, I've said this before, but Allah Made Me Funny was really a curriculum. It was a curriculum.
How
Uh,
so? That's fascinating that you call it that.
was it was protest comedy. I learned
Mm.
it from Dick Gregory. That was my mentor. Now,
Wow.
if you don't know protest comedy after hanging out with Dick Gregory, then you're just not paying attention.
Protest
And
comedy. I love
so
that.
it was like very surgical, man. Very surgical. I remember being in Toronto and we had a gig. Our big gig was at Yuck Yucks in Toronto. Now you have to realize I had to talk myself into the club. I had to tell them that Muslims were funny, and we had this wellspring of support. We got nothing. I spent a year promoting a tour that wasn't there. I just had it in name. I got a club owner to bite on it, and I think the argument was he didn't want it. I'm like, well, I'm looking at stuff. I'm like, you support tribalism with comedy. Like you support tribalism, and you did
Hmm.
this, you did that. Why can't the Muslims? And the thing is, you had to get them to stop. You had to get them to stop serving alcohol. So this is like 2004. You're telling them no alcohol.
That's a
Yuck
big
yuck.
ask for a business owner too.
Yeah, yeah, something that's never been seen.
Hmm.
Not only that, I want you not to serve alcohol. And they got so good that they were like, we believe. They went out and bought halal meat. You know,
That's how
it
it's
was,
done. That's the best kind of dawah right there.
yeah, it was like that. And
So
I
that was
remember, I remember it was shape shifting, man. You know, I remember walking into the green room while the show was there. We sold out. So you're taking something that's never been seen before, never been done before, and it sells out. Not not one night. You know, we did 6 shows. So imagine we sold out 6 shows.
That's incredible.
Um,
On a
I
brand new
remember,
concept.
yeah, I remember walking in and I see this guy here, and I'm like, "Who's this dude? That's in the green room. This is our show." Turned out to be Russell Peters, and but this is Russell Peters before he's Russell Peters.
Uh
So there's a case that could be made. That was his home club, and he had never sold out.
huh. Somebody was getting real hurt.
Yeah, that was his club,
this
and
is
he had never sold out.
you're talking about Yuck Yucks in Toronto?
Yeah,
Hmm.
and then he's like, well, "Who are these dudes? Nobody's seen them. Nobody's heard them. You got two Americans, myself, Azur Usman. You got this hodgepodge of comedians that had some connection to somebody who knew who was a Muslim or whatever. My dad was 10% Muslim, whatever. Um, and Toronto showed out. I mean, you had lines down the street. And I remember being really, really surgical after I talked to Dick Gregory because they told me you're going to do the PR. And I always joke that the what the Muslim community really needed for his image was a really good Jewish PR person.
Mm.
And
Just one.
we happened to get one. His name was Seth Feller,
Uh-huh.
There
and
you
we
go.
got coverage. We got coverage everywhere. I'm like, okay, he's going to do his job as long as we pay him. So we actually kept him on we kept him on salary after Yuck Yucks. We were getting all this coverage because you have to figure out what are you going to put your money in, visibility or marketing. I'm like, well, we don't know what marketing yet, so the visibility is what people saw, and that was that was groundbreaking. And so yeah, catch now. No offense, it's very funny people, but you ain't put in that work, man. You know,
Mm.
it's like me going to it's like me going to a baseball game and I see a black player and I'm like, yeah, I make the league and I'm like, yeah, I'm in the Major League Baseball. I'm a black man in Major League Baseball. I'm like, yeah, it's easy now. You're not
Mm.
Jackie Robinson. You know what I'm saying? You're not Moses Fleetwood Walker. You know what I mean?
The
Who,
path is
who,
paved now.
So
who incidentally was the first black man to play in Major League Baseball.
Mm.
Wasn't Jackie Robinson. But nobody wants to be the Moses Fleetwood Walker.
Yeah. It's a lot easier when the path is already paved ahead of you.
It's a lot easier and it's a lot easier to forget because you'll have people who say, I don't want to do that path. And you have people who may not want to deal with you, right? Like you guys have a show. Say your show is good, right? But people realize they look at the show and go, well, I can't get out of that show what I want.
Mm.
I'm not gonna be able to get these guys to do what I want, right? So they'll look for somebody who's doing the show who's willing to do what they want.
Mm.
and they may not have a connection or history of what you guys do, but that's what it is. I mean, Muslim comedy. Um, wow, I'm giving you guys some jewels here.
There's life philosophies right here.
You're just bringing the
Muslim
smoke.
comedy was not Muslim comedy first started out.
Uh huh.
It was Arabs. It was Arab comedians trying to capitalize on 9/11.
Okay.
You
So
talking about Dean Abudella?
I'm talking about Dean Abdallah. I'm talking about
Oh.
Ahmed Ahmed. I'm talking about Maysoon. I'm
Hmm.
talking about all of them.
There was that
Rami.
first wave.
Well, here's the deal, though. It's like you got New York comics. They're trying to build on that, but the issue is if if being Muslim or being associated with Muslim will get me what I want in some cases, in some of the cases, I'll throw that in. So I remember knowing that I'm gonna have to do Allah Made Me Funny because they had a show in Washington D.C., the D.C. Improv, and so I'm like, yo, these, because I'm thinking, oh, they get these Muslims, they're doing, and it was called Arabian Nights.
Mm.
Mark my words, it was Arabian Nights, and I walked in that joint, and it was nothing Muslim about that joint. It was serving alcohol. It was, just the aggressiveness and just the volatility and the profanity on stage. I get profanity on stage, but normally it's like you're trying to, you know, the curse word can't be the joke. That's the way
It's
I
got to be
learned.
artfully placed. Yeah.
Richard Pryor was like, I understand Richard Pryor. I understand where he's coming from. What are you guys talking about? Uh, F this and F that, and I'm like, it's like a bad version. It's like Arab Def Comedy Jam. But I remember going into the dressing room, like, 'cause I knew one of the comics, and I'll leave his name out. He had a bottle of wine. Oh, yeah, sound like him. I'm like, sound like him. With it,
Mm.
he gave me the salam with the bottle of wine. And the other thing is, that thing was not inclusive. It was
Yeah.
not inclusive. It was not inclusive of African Americans. Wasn't inclusive of white converts. Wasn't inclusive of Pakistanis. Wasn't inclusive of Indians. It was just Arab, right? And that's when you go, that's the difference. That's what Imam Worthy Muhammad was telling me.
Mm. And so Allah Made
So
Me Funny really came and it
all that
threw a
made me
wrench
funny
in how
was that
things were, and
he
it,
was
it changed the
inclusive.
way.
Yeah, we had the history of Islam in America. We had Azim Muhammad, who was part of the Nation of Islam. We had Azhar Zaman, who's from the immigrant community. And you have me from the WD Muhammad community. So that's the first resurrection, second resurrection, as Dr. Jackson used to say that the third resurrection was all three of us.
There you go.
So yeah, I mean that's what it was. So imagine you walk in going, these people on stage have nothing to do with what I'm trying to do. Um, and they can't help in the cause of Islam if it's exclusive, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
If it's not inclusive, then it's not really Islam, right? So it's like, yeah, you have to do something now. And I'm like, I get it. The old man was right.
Yeah.
I get it,
It
which
was a
is deep.
calling. It was much needed at that time in the comedy scene. And I mean, like, since then, we had, like you said, there's been a lot more Muslim comics that have been inspired from that, and a lot more Muslim
A lot of them
comedians.
are inspired, but they're not doing the heavy lifting that we did 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, you can only
Yeah,
build a scene one time. Now that it's built, like, the tree has been planted and you can see the fruit of it.
yeah,
But
yeah. And I'm like, yo, I mean, the times I go out and it's like I go to certain sets and brothers, hey, come on, but I'm the OG, you know. So it's almost like I don't want to be a history teacher. Um, but that's it. I remember when I had to write my master's, and I talk about this cross sectional understanding of religion and comedy and cultural competency. What was interesting was as I started my research, and this is the worst thing that can happen when you're doing your thesis, you realize that all the information, 90%, 95% of the information is you. It's you. It hasn't been done before.
Uh-huh.
And I have people who are writing, there are people who are getting their doctorates about Muslim comedy. I know four of them right now. They're getting their doctorates about Muslim comedy. And you know who they come to first?
The OG.
Yeah.
The
We want to know
OG.
about, I'm like, do you really want to know? Like, I mean, I have by the mercy and the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, man, I have a deep comedy knowledge
Mm,
of African American comedians who, in some regards, had a lot of attachment and relationships with Muslims, with the African American Muslim community, believe it or not.
mhm, mhm,
So, like Cosby won't say it, but Cosby in Philadelphia, he was deep with the Muslims.
Muslim adjacent. A lot of people are just Muslim adjacent.
Well, North Philly and all that. You figure from the 50s to now,
Hmm.
uh, Philadelphia was a Muslim city.
Pretty much, right?
For Kenny Gamble, all those guys. I mean, Brother Luke Mon, but yeah, Philadelphia. Even when Cosby comes in, he used to check in with Kenny Gamble. I'm like, wow, because they had these relationships. Uh, I mean, hey, the first black mafia is out of Philadelphia. And what did it have? A bunch of Muslims.
Hmm.
But I think when you start really
First mafia.
breaking it down, I mean, Red Fox had a deep relationship. It's in Malcolm X's book, autobiography of Malcolm X.
Hmm.
He was Chicago Red and Malcolm X was Detroit Red,
Yeah.
right? You had all of these guys. I got to hang out with a uh, comedian, going back to the Chitlin Circuit, Apollo days. His name was Nipsey Russell, and he used to do these rhymes. Nipsey Russell was like, man, we knew where the Muslims were, and they came and da da da. And it's not, it wasn't this picture of very. They were serious, but it was like they were personable. You know what I mean? And the jazz scene was a ton of Muslims. The Ahmadiyya Muslims are the first. To me, I say those are the first black folk to get passports and go overseas.
That's right. The Ahmadiyya movement was pretty big in the black community fairly earlier
It was
on.
huge. It was huge, and that changed that moved the needle in
Mm,
terms of Islam in America. You're talking about 1910, 1920. If you
right.
look at the cultural balance, marriages between African Americans weren't legalized, recognized as legal until the late 1880s.
That's crazy to even think about.
So you start thinking about the scope of Islam. You had Islam in America before people could vote.
Yeah.
You
So,
had
and that
Islam.
was like in around around that time you're talking about like the 20s, the 30s. I know there was a lot of Arab immigration as well. So there
Yeah,
was
but
that threat of Islam, but then at the same time on the census they're white. And so it's two very
that's
different
right. 100%.
experiences.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Alhamdulillah. You're 100% right, and that was it. And the Nation of Islam for all its male leadership, man, women built that movement, bro.
Mm,
The
that's incredible.
genius of African American Muslim women at that time to literally say we have to frame the leadership that we want to follow.
Hmm.
People forget that Elijah Muhammad was locked up for 5 years uh, for not, for he didn't dodge the draft, but he was a conscientious objector, right? Refused to serve. So he
Hmm.
was locked up for 5 years. Sister Claire Muhammad keeps it going.
Yeah. Without skipping a beat.
And the thing is, the music has always been around. Jazz was a soundtrack for Islam.
Yeah, and Minister Farrakhan himself, great violin player.
incredible. He was a
So,
calypso singer. No, he was Eugene the Snake Charmer. He was like a calypso singer.
wow, I didn't know that.
If
That's
you ever,
that's amazing.
I did the voiceover for. I did the voiceover for a podcast with Muhammad Ali called "The Universal Champ." It was like six, so I did the narration and the voiceover, and they talk about Ali being 15 years old, going to boxing trials, right?
Hmm.
And he gets a hold of the record. He loses, as a matter of fact, but somebody gives him a record from Louis Farrakhan. White man's heaven is a black man's hell.
Okay, at
And he,
15, this is Muhammad Ali at 15.
yeah, and Farrakhan sings it. If you ever heard it, it's like I think NWA lifted it. They, with F the police, they lifted that front part.
Wow.
What?
Yeah,
This is deep cuts. This is deep cuts.
yeah, like we find you guilty of being the biggest murderer and da, da, da. That was
Oh.
Farrakhan.
Oh wow.
Farrakhan did it first, right? So you
Interesting.
hit an album, and then when Ali is in Miami, getting ready to fight Sonny Liston, they say he sees Captain Sonny. I think it was Muhammad's Mosque number 15. I might be wrong. Forgive me. I forgot all the numbers of the mosque. Um, he sees Captain Sonny and asks him about the lessons, and the lessons are in that album, and that was the exposure to him coming to the Nation of Islam.
Wow.
But even still, he's surrounded by musicians, athletes. His relationship with Sam Cooke, a tremendous relationship. He actually did an album with Sam Cooke, produced an album. He wasn't the best singer in the world, but I'm like, hey, he thought he was.
So and
But
then so even within your own artistry, like there's these ties with jazz music and odes to the greats. You have a special called "A Love Supreme." Why did you
yes,
call it that? What's the link here between jazz and comedy and the inspiration to call it that?
well, in Love Supreme, the concept. I'm a concepts guy, so all that made me funny was the concept. Right? And I tell you how concept works. Um, if you tell a joke, it's a joke. You tell a concept, it's a story that you can reframe.
Hmm.
It's the joke that keeps going. It grows. Two men walk into a bar and order a beer. That's a joke. You know, two men walk out of the rain. They're thirsty. They don't have money. Now it gives you all kind of options in terms of what
Hmm.
that verbiage is going to be. That conversation is going to be, and people tie into rich, a robust, dialogue, if you will. So, Love Supreme, the concept was almost like Allah made me funny. I said, I want something where even if people, I called it Allah made me funny, and the concept was even if you hate Allah, you gotta recognize His name.
Yeah.
You just can't go made me funny. What? I'm not gonna say it. Um, and this is your thinking, right? This is your thinking. Allah made me funny. Allah made me funny. Um, stays literally in the key of G or in the key of B flat, uh, audibly,
Hmm.
because it's Allah, right? It's not Allah. It's Allah. Allah made me funny, and it stays up in the range.
Hmm.
So, on terms of a audio visceral kind of thing, it stays in the ears, right?
Hmm.
Love Supreme. The concept was, I want to do a con. I wanted this. I wanted to be my opus, right?
Yeah.
And my thing, the concept was, what if one of these legendary jazz labels like Verve or Blue Note decided to do a comedy special?
Yeah.
And it's like, how would it sound? And by ladies and gentlemen, tonight, Blue Note proudly presents the comedy special Love Supreme. On drums, we have Leon Alexander Jr. On bass, we
Mm.
have Taurus Mateen. And on comedy tonight, featuring Preacher Moss. And that was it.
You had a full backing band, full jazz band.
And we stayed on stage the whole time. Like, and the beautiful part of it was we couldn't rehearse. Like, we couldn't. because you'll lose the spontaneity
There's
of
a
it.
lot of improvising in both jazz and
Well,
comedy,
well, it
creating the
was.
energy.
Well, this is why it's challenging because you can't go out with your best joke or your opening joke because you know the band is still warming up.
Mm,
So you have to know audibly where it fills in, and the audience is cold because the audience doesn't know what they're about to see.
yeah,
They're thinking the band's just gonna come off and they're gonna walk off. No, the band stays.
it's part of the show.
This is the whole. Yeah, this is the whole thing. I named it Love Supreme because I'm a huge John Coltrane fan.
Hmm.
Because John Coltrane took some aspects of secular jazz and he made it spiritual engagement.
That's right.
So when you hear it, it's like church.
That's
It's
right.
literally like church.
I mean, I've been to the Church of St. John Coltrane in San Francisco, and
Oh yeah, so you know what I'm talking about, and you know who I'm talking about, right?
very special. Yeah.
Well, the thing was, and a lot of people don't know the name of this. Love Supreme is still the best-selling jazz album ever, right? Him and Miles Davis. That's a whole nother conversation. But the name of it was called Love Supreme. A lot of people don't know that the original title of the album was supposed to be
Allah Supreme.
Allah Supreme.
Yeah.
So I felt
Goosebumps,
like,
man.
yo, however many years later, I'm gonna carry this thing out with. I could do it with comedy. I'm gonna do it with this, and it's like, yo, it was the best in relationship comedy I've ever done because there's a relationship with the musicians, there's a relationship with the audience, and there's a plateau for just spiritual engagement. Or I mean, I really wish I shot the whole weekend,
Mm,
not just a comedy show. There were halakas the day before. Uh, Instead, Osama Cannon, I'll be pleased with him. We went to his house. We met. Our mothers met. My mom met his. Check this. It was my mom, Chappelle's sister, and his mom just sitting in the corner room like, yo, it's just crazy.
Wow.
that's unreal.
So Dave's like, my mom's coming. I know your mom's coming, Doug. I'm like, your sister's coming too. They flew out from Ohio. They were there like
Hmm.
the whole like 3 days. And
Hmm.
they're in the audience, and it's like, so I got my two moms, right? I got my mom, and I got, I'm the adopted third son, right? So I literally call her Mama Sion. So here, and then this thing, it snowballs because it starts as this comedy thing, but then it's like really, really this spiritual thing that just grows out, you
Yeah.
know.
So calling it
And
Love Supreme is like touching on that spiritual
in
note.
love, and I ended it like Love Supreme. So at the end, you see no credits.
No,
There's no
that's it. That's the
credits.
fade out.
I mean, all the credits has been like the musicians and the comedian. I'm like, there's no credits. We fade out because just leave the spirituality and the humor right there.
That's
For
beautiful.
it control it. You got three things. You have three things that are American in it. So you have jazz, you
Hmm.
have stand up comedy,
Yeah.
you have African American Islam. There's three things.
That were created in the
Mhm.
states that are not from anywhere else in
Right,
the world.
right. These three very organic things, and you got them on one stage. I got the jazz behind me. I got audience in front of me, and you're literally like, I'm gonna because you know all we did with the musicians is we just agreed that we're gonna stay in a certain key. So I wrote music in a certain key. The only shift, if you go back and watch it, I think because people are telling me to cut it up and put it out on social media.
Hmm.
There's a break. There's a break in the comedy special. It's like a bridge in a comedy special. Like you have bridge in the
Hmm.
music. Like if you wrote music, it'd be like verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, out.
Yeah.
So this is verse, chorus, and we have a bridge in the middle of it. And I actually named the bit. like a musician will say that our next song is, and this, I'm like, this next piece is called, it's called Donald Trump in E flat, and that is the only time we actually switch the tonality of it, and then we go back to key of G.
Oh wow. That's funny. That's really funny. So it's so bringing that sort of spirituality, the music of it, the fluidity. I mean, it's really spectacular because "A Love Supreme" has really touched so many lives. Like you said, it's best-selling jazz
Yes, yeah.
album. Like that is
I mean, I listen to
undeniable.
it a lot. I listened to it a lot before I took my shahada.
It's undeniable, and like it reads like a prayer. You read his liner notes; it's reading like a prayer.
It's a dua.
You
It's a
know,
dua.
100%. I'm like, am I reading Surah Fatiha? Like this is talking about the
It
same
is.
concepts. It's touching on the same
And then
things.
they
So
say in the chant, "Love Supreme," but then you either
yeah.
you imagine it or you actually hear it, like Allah
Yeah,
Supreme,
exactly.
Allah
I'm sitting in
Supreme,
that church chanting along like Allah Supreme. And that
and
and
I'm like,
so I think it was last year at South by Southwest Reed Society for Sacred Arts. They brought out the National Sufi Ensemble to do Indian style Qawwali concert, but it was at a jazz location in downtown Austin.
mm,
And it was at Parker's, and it was really interesting because we had a couple of jazz musicians on stage. The brother Lufuki, his son Nur was there on stage, and so they're
yeah,
in the
that's my
back
man.
playing jazzy.
Yeah, that's
And
my
and
man.
so they brought Allahu, a traditional Qawwali Indian Pakistani song, and merged it into a Love Supreme. Playing them both together on the same stage at the jazz club was just such an unreal experience.
Yeah, I mean,
And
you can't. It is no, you. I wish I was there. I mean, I think the closest I've seen to it is Wayne Shorter. He's like, he was like one of the last jazz greats, like jazz geniuses. This
mhm.
guy is otherworldly. He had a album called Emmanuel, and he wrote a symphony. He's a jazz dude. He wrote a full symphony, and it's like he dropped the jazz band in the middle of the symphony, and it's so seamless. He wants you to feel like, oh, it's a mistake. I'm like, it's not people don't make those kind of mistakes.
No.
I make those kind of mistakes. You're a genius, and he's one of those guys that's he's such a genius that he's childlike with it. You know what I mean?
He's just playing with it. He knows exactly what he's
He's like
doing.
he's childlike with it. Like, doesn't everybody do it? No, Wayne, just you, just you do it. We
Yeah.
can't do it. We wait for you. So I'll go running in the morning, listen to a Mannion, and the first track is like 15 minutes. If I'm not careful, I will lose my mile count.
Mm.
I would have planned to run 3 miles. I'll be like 6 miles. Like, why am I so tired? Because you can't remember where it started because it's a whole musical suite.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
so the thing with Love Supreme is a musical suite. And so when I did Love Supreme Anatomy of Gratitude, it was a
yeah,
musical suite as close as I could make it.
yeah. And so that's and speaking of brother Lou Fuki, actually, he you want to make sure
Love
that
that,
I
love that
ask
brother,
you.
man.
You
His
want to make
whole wife,
sure.
his whole vibe with the wife and the son. I love that guy, man.
I'm saying that. So I was talking to him a little bit. He said to make sure I ask you about the story of Abdullah Black. If you could share a little bit of Abdullah Black's story for us on this episode.
Well, it's in a special actually. Um, I talk about, being a convert and you're very hungry. There's a sense of urgency when you're a convert that if I'm 20 years old or 21 years old, that means that for 21 years, I wasn't getting this information about Islam.
Hmm.
So you're in a hurry up mode. So the joke
Yeah.
is you got to kind of be careful about who you um, get your Islam from. Because it's
Gotta be
funny.
real careful about that.
Yeah, so Abdullah Black, I say basically, the joke is I thought he was a scholar. I'm a rookie Muslim. I thought he was a scholar. The reason I thought he was a scholar is because he had this really long black beard. Like it was shiny and He just glistened all the time, and I'm like, and he wasn't a scholar, bro. He turned out. It turned out he had taken a shahada, um, probably like 3 to 4 weeks before I did.
That makes him an expert. 3 weeks is a long time.
And
Wow.
I laugh. I said his name was Abdullah Black. He named himself, right?
That was his actual name that he made up.
And, it's Kirk. I gotta remember. I gotta remember. That's a long time ago, bro. It's Kirk, but Abdullah Black, and it was funny because it sounded like he was thinking about being in the 5% Nation, right?
Mhm.
Like I read it. I remember I was in New York. We did a show at the Apollo with Iman, and the headquarters for the 5% Nation is right in the right in the alley behind them.
Mhm.
And I was like, "Yo," then I walked up and I was like, "Take some pictures." Brother came out. He said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" I said, "Oh, assalamu alaikum, brother." He's like, "Yeah, yeah, 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 yeah." I said, "No, man, I'm just trying to meet the brothers." He's like, "Okay, all right." He said, "So what's your name?" He goes, my name is Born Black." I was like, "Man, me too."
Mhm.
I had those names, Knowledge Freedom,
Oh
Knowledge Freedom.
man. Is
Uh,
is this the Apollo? Is this the Iman at the Apollo that was like what 14 years ago?
hmm When they
Uh,
had Most Def there. At Most
yeah.
Def, they had
Amir Suleiman. I know,
Suleiman.
Narisi was there. That was like a who's who of the Muslim creative scene of
They
everybody.
had Samaya Ali. She was almost like doing opera.
Yeah, Liza Garza was there, Asif
He was there
Manvi,
with,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the
Yeah, yeah. I
Reminders,
remember that I called up.
Outlandish, just everybody.
I remember I called up Rami because I think I think he had Azhar who was going to MC, and I
Yeah,
I don't know what I kind of just took offense. Like, yo, man, it's Apollo.
yeah,
Like, how are you not? You know what I mean?
yeah.
Literally, like, I don't know what your deal is. I'm like, that's Apollo, bro. I'm like, I don't care what you're gonna tell me. It's like, I said, but the first person that walks out on stage and touches that stone better be a black person, bro. I was like, you're in Harlem. You're not in Chicago. You're in Harlem, bro. It's different. And I
Yeah.
think it was good. You know why? Because there were a lot of brothers who came and they were like, yo, we they were like, yo, you on? Because people don't know. You travel all these years and it's like a man came to New York, which is beautiful. And of course, Most was there, Yassine was there, and da da da. But it was like they were like comedy, and at this time, you got to realize Alameda Be Funny's been out for a minute now.
20 years. That's 2 decades. A lot
Yeah,
has
we've been
changed
out a
since
little
then.
bit, and I'm like, yo, man, and that's the first time I ever hit Rami up. I'm like, I don't know what you're gonna tell me. It's almost like a gangster move. It's almost like saying in a halal way, I'm gonna be on your set, deal with it.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm like, I'm not in the audience. I ain't that dude.
yeah.
That's the way
Nice.
you carry it. It's like I'm not that dude. I always felt like Miles Davis, man. They always talk about they always talk about Miles Davis and Wynton Marsalis. And at one point in time, like the record companies were trying to put out Wynton Marsalis as his new trumpet guy, all world trumpet, which is fine. It's always gonna be Miles, just so you know, right?
Hmm.
In his grave, it's always gonna be Miles. But they had gotten Wynton Marsalis to say some kind of disparaging things about Miles because Miles was exploring different music. So they had Wynton Marsalis quoted as saying these things about Miles. So I think the show was in Philadelphia, maybe, and the record company. I think Wynton Marsalis was there, and Miles was on his horn, and they wanted Wynton to sit in and play with Miles.
Mm.
And they're like, go ask him. And he walks up, he's like, hey, I think I can sit down. And Miles is like, get the F off my stage.
The
I
That's
like
stage
fine.
is
I
mine.
like that artistic gangsterism, right?
Yeah,
Hey, get up on stage.
the OG.
I'm not talking about like KRS-One pushing PM Don off the stage, but every once in a while you need that, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So let's go back to a little bit about you have a lot of background doing community work, activism. Helping as a teacher,
Sure.
and also helping in different communities.
Hmm.
And one of them is like one of the things you are known for is going to prisons and doing shows there. Um, so why do you do that, and how what is it? How what does it do for you?
Well, I guess my reference or my framework for comedy has always been service.
Mm,
So, with a certain amount of confidence, I could say that most of the jobs I had in life outside of comedy were service jobs.
mm,
So, teaching was service, being an outreach worker was service, rec was service, group home counselor was service. And I've always worked with distressed communities. And I want to frame that. I've always worked with distressed communities. So
mm.
even when I was teaching, I taught severely emotionally disturbed kids and never did regular ed. When I was a counselor, I worked with adjudicateds in Washington, D.C., Calorama 2 group home. When I did outreach work, it was connected to social services office in Fairfax County, Virginia. So it's always been that work, right? And interesting thing, I didn't see the Muslim community as distressed until 9/11.
Mm. That was a calling.
So that was almost a lateral move. Um, and I joke in the comedy special about Trump. I said, I taught severely most disturbed kids. I said, so that makes me uniquely qualified to talk about this particular president.
So who you
Uh,
voting for at coming this election?
Man, I'm voting for me. Not just
Preacher Moms for president. You heard it here first.
at least I get one.
Yeah.
Right? I'm gonna write myself in.
New Tandoori Cafe welcomes you to experience the authentic flavors of Pakistani and Indian cuisine at their brand new location in San Jose. Indulge in their halal dishes featuring a diverse array of rich curries, such as Lahori chole, mouth-watering wraps, aromatic biryanis like Hyderabadi dum biryani, my favorite, and of course the essential experience of naan and barbecue smoked in a traditional tandoor oven. Whether you're a connoisseur of Desi cuisine or new to its delights, we welcome you to take a peek at their menu at tandoori-cafe.com and plan your next meal.
And even in the turning comedy right now, comedy is blood sport between comedians. It's not blood sport with comedians and institutions anymore. So your nominees like Jon Stewart and things like that. I really enjoy, have a deep respect for Hassan Minhaj, right? But when he went through what he went through, people tried to say, well, because of X, Y, and Z, this wasn't true. This was fabricated. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They were like, well, you out of the game.
Mm-hmm. So
I would
they
have
did the
loved to see.
forensics on him.
They did the forensics, yeah. And I'm like, here's the deal, man. You have to know people are going to do the forensics on you. Somebody says it Abdullah Black. I'm like, yeah. Let me see if I can get him on the phone because that's how tight it has to be.
This better be a real person answering this phone named
Okay.
Yeah,
Abdullah
yeah,
Black.
yeah.
Speaking of Abdullah Black, let's get back to the question.
Sure.
Last
I'm
question
sorry,
here.
brother.
That's one thing I was going to ask you about. So, back then, 10, 12 years ago, it was still kind of new, the whole concept for most Muslims. But
Hmm.
now, as the community has developed, there's several generations who have grown up here, and now they have their own kids. I know a lot of people that I have mentioned to me that they were young kids themselves the last time they went to Muslim Unity Day, and
Hmm.
now they're all grown up and married, and they have their young kids now, so they're looking
Yes,
looking
yes.
forward to bring them. So, how do you plan for these type of events in terms of, because the audiences, it's kind of not easy to predict, how they're gonna react, and sometimes there's a mix of the uncles and aunties, and then you'll
Sure.
have the younger people. So how do you prepare for something like that?
Well, two things. One, at 57, I have a good feel for uncles and aunties, whether they're whether immigrant, whether the Indian, Pakistani, whatever, African Americans. I've dealt with that. That's
Mm.
okay. With the kids, you got to remember I was a teacher,
Mm.
and so
What grades did you teach?
I taught all the way up to adult ed, juvenile detention,
Hmm.
special ed, intermediate, middle school, high school. My last couple years of teaching, I had a couple years of substitute teaching,
Hmm.
and people who teach severely most disturbed kids, they're like gold.
Hmm.
So there was always an opening.
Yeah.
They're like, you can come back. We'll get you, an emergency teaching license. Yeah, because it's like that was it. The kids would be disappointed when they knew that. Oh, he's already taught. He's already taught this kids. I'm like, I know all the hustles. You know,
Yeah.
so I know all the hustles. Do you know my hustles? No. Then go ahead and sit down. Let's get this going. But I think
That's
the thing
right.
is, for myself and the audience, in some relative regard, is that we have history.
Hmm.
Very, we have history.
So it's like a family reunion kind of
Yeah.
deal.
So the aunties and uncles come. The only thing about aunties and uncles is that they want to hear their favorite joke.
Hmm.
So you can do the same act over. They'll want you to because it resonates with them. But
Yeah.
then you're creative and it's like, I want to do the new material. And they'll
Yeah.
laugh at that too. But you gotta, but it's like jazz, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we see Coltrane at a concert. We want to hear giant steps. We want to hear this and that. But man, we want to hear Love Supreme.
I mean, you can't get off the stage without saying the
Whatever
voodoo
iteration,
joke. You know what I mean?
whatever iteration of that you're gonna
You're
give
right.
us, we better hear it. It may not be
Hmm.
exactly the same, but we better hear
Hmm.
it. And that's the beautiful part about us. But I think for a Muslim audience, the thing that I think is really unique, I guess, which has nothing to do with me, is people really come to comedy shows to reaffirm aspects of their Muslim identity.
Mm.
That this is an American art form, and we are not so much laughing, but we're engaging or we're celebrating this thing about every other culture has done it before. I
Yeah.
mean, the Jewish comedians had the Borscht Belt, Muslim comedians, black comedians had the Chitlin Circuit. You see what I'm saying, right?
Mm.
So that the Muslims have this thing. The weird part is nobody wants us to have it, and the only thing
Yeah,
that's even
but we
weirder
need
is that
it.
only thing that's weirder is that there are Muslims that don't want Muslims to have an outlet for Muslim expression.
Yeah, we got a lot of work to do on that front for
Well,
sure.
and that's the I think if you and Abbas alluded to it that that's Islam coming from another country, and either you're going to, uh, I want to say, and I'm not even going to say accept, but you're definitely going to be aware that these are the things that are happening in Islam. Islam has a different texture.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, not just
Undeniably.
yeah. I mean, even geographically, sometimes Islam has a different texture
Yeah.
and it has a different format. So this Islam is, it's not legislated. It's not a part of state government. It's not. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the thing that makes it beautiful is though it's not a part of state government. It's not legislated. It's not the. It has the potential to change so many things, and it has changed so many things.
That's
You know,
powerful,
being
especially for protest comedy. It
yeah, I
changes
mean, there's
hearts,
the
changes
whole
minds.
yeah. I mean, Dick Gregory is a funny story. You know, I it was doing Def Jam, so I'm in my 20s, and I'm into this space. This is before Allah made me funny. Years before Allah made me funny, like
Mm-hmm.
almost well, at least 12 years before Allah made me funny. But I'm still trying to be a Muslim comedian. But I'm in my own mind, I'm a Muslim doing comedy. I'm in comedy clubs,
Yeah.
so I'm not cursing, I'm not drinking, I'm not cursing, I'm not drinking, I'm not chasing waitresses. You get the idea, right? But I'm still, by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm still delivering on stage. I'm giving people the business on stage. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm this funny dude, and people try and find, you know what? He was up there 45 minutes, but he was clean,
Mm-hmm.
right? He was clean. People. It was like that. He didn't have a drink, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um,
People
but the
remember that.
yeah, people remember that, and I think the thing with that I remember was we had Def Jam that came out,
Mm-hmm.
and Def Jam was the opposite. And long story short, I did this club down in Chicago. I told the lady I don't really want to do the Def Jam room. I'm a social. I do social commentary. Blah 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 blah. Oh no no no! I'm a teacher. She yeah yeah yeah. And a place called the Cotton Club. I think it was Cotton Club. Whatever. It was a disaster. I got fired 2 nights in a row.
Wow.
I got fired on a Friday night. They said come back Saturday. Came back Saturday. Got fired again. I'm almost about to quit comedy. Like
No.
I'm literally about to quit comedy. And I tell my mom, goes, don't quit comedy. I have a friend, you should talk to him. I'm like, who is it? She goes, Dick Gregory. I'm like, what?
That's your mom's friend?
Yeah. So she goes and gets Dick Gregory's number. Just call him. I call him and I'm like pouring out my heart to him. Like, man, I went down, I got fired, and then I got fired again, and I'm telling him all this stuff. And then I'm like, man, I'm trying to do this thing. I'm trying to be, stay on my dean. He's your dean. I'm a Muslim. I'm trying to, do this thing. He goes, you a Muslim? I go, yeah. You died on stage? I said, I died on stage. And he goes, listen. He said, you're not the first most funny Muslim to die on stage. I'm like, who else died? He goes, Malcolm X. And I'm like,
Mm.
and he goes, suck it up.
Wow.
Suck it up. But then you forget that he was the comedian for Medgar Evers. He was a
Mhm.
comedian for Martin Luther King. He was a comedian for Malcolm X. He was a comedian for Muhammad Ali. You're talking
Yeah.
all these, and they like he was a comedian for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad,
Yeah.
who tried to get him to join the Nation of Islam. And he was like, yeah, he's like,
That's some
he's
deep
basically saying,
heritage,
he's
man.
basically saying you ain't been through anything. I know Muslims that really been through some things,
Yeah.
and so yeah, he was inspirational with the Allah made me funny too.
Mm.
But
So
he was like, no, he was like, yo, this almost saying, have you have you gotten shot? Have you been doing comedy and stood up for you really gotten shot? I'm like, no. He goes, I have.
wow.
So I'm like, yo. And ironically, I there was a Def Jam tour that came through Milwaukee, and I did a set. Right, I got the promoter to let me do a set, and murdered the room.
Mhm. Mhm.
Murdered the room. Alhamdulillah.
That means you did a good job, right?
Yeah, yeah. Thank God.
Just for those
Yeah.
people who don't know the terminology. You
But
killed it. You killed it.
look, I wrecked it with a kufi on. How about that?
Oh,
I
Man, I
got a
want
picture of me on stage in 1992, Comedy Cafe in Milwaukee with a kufi on.
wow.
to. I kind of need to see
Nice.
this.
Nice.
I was doing
Yeah.
my thing, bro.
You gotta share that.
Mm.
I was Abdullah Black in it.
And so, what other besides that? What other projects you have coming up, or what can people
I am
know
launching.
that you're working on? Sorry.
Yeah, well, you can go to preachermoss.com and you can take a peek at that. I took my comedy. We're still working on the site, but I took my comedy album, Confessions of a Muslim Comedian, turned it into an NFT, so people can go on that. I know Ethereum is what worth $4 now, but in any event, that's one. The other thing that's big, and maybe we should have talked about a little bit more. Uh, I'm in the process of launching a Muslim comedy record label called Permissible Laughter.
Oh wow.
Okay,
Nice.
that's a big deal.
Nice.
Yeah, it's
Nice.
a big deal,
Big time.
and so Confessions of a Muslim Comedian would be the first record off of that. I have stacks of things that I've done in the past. Preacher Moss Live at Muhammad's Mosque, number 28 in St. Louis. And that's when we had the Nation of Islam, Sunni Muslims, Ahmadiyya Muslims, and converts and non converts. Pretty historic. Uh,
Mm.
Muhammad's Mosque, number 28, Minister Donald Muhammad. Long time, long time, NY guy.
Is that Donald Trump's new Muslim name?
No,
Donald Muhammad from New York.
he'll never be a Muhammad,
See,
bro. He'll never be a Muhammad, bro. Take that Muhammad
you
back.
didn't like my joke there, huh?
Well, you know what, Minister Donald Muhammad. I'm like, I don't want to mess with his name, man. You might get a knock on your podcast. Can I talk to you a minute, brother? Yeah, I'm really happy about this Muslim comedy record label. Because I'm always looking at ways we can express ourselves, and also I'm looking at ways like you have to constantly remind our community about its uniqueness,
Mm.
particularly as a demographic financial entity. You know, we have we have this weird forbearance where we'll do everything and then we'll give it to Hollywood, and Hollywood will take it and sell it back to us at a premium.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, that's
I love
true.
like
it.
the rappers, you know, I remember the rappers. I remember Cool Herc, and I remember Spoonie G and all these guys back in the day in the '70s.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like they basically took that vibe, made it hip hop, made a commercial. Now I can't even. I don't even know what the rappers are talking about now.
Yeah.
Yep.
I need cliff notes for what they're talking about.
You're not talking.
And
They're not really talking
it's
about
hard.
anything.
No, it's just hard to watch it. I mean, we just had a rap battle with Drake and Kendrick Lamar, and everybody goes, "Ooh!" I'm like, dude, it's not like Cool Mo D and you know Busy B back in the day, and Harlem World back in 1980, and it's happening live. These are two guys. I mean, it's caught on. People had audio tapes back in the day. That was a legend. And the audio tape went up and down. I mean, these dudes making videos and going into the studio. I'm like, these dudes were doing it live. I mean, and now I'm dating myself, but fine, I'm dating myself because people need to know about that. But I feel like with the record label, it gives us a different type of tenor how we express ourselves. So yeah, I want it to be comedy, but I want to be able to take scholars, put them in front of a microphone, maybe have a jazz band behind them, and really start talking about these things. You know, the different type of mediums. Like we talked about journalism. So it's a Muslim comedy record label, but it does have a foundation in journalistic expression, even though it's comedy or even though it's scholarly expression. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what we need, man. And nobody's done it. I know two people that put out albums, but the difference is you can make the case, a very strong case. Nobody knows them because they're not tied into the community. They're
Mm-hmm.
saying I'm Muslim, but everybody goes, I don't know you, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're it's almost like I release something that's close to the Muslim community, hoping that the Muslim community will open up its arms and take it in and call
Mm-hmm.
it ours. You know, I have a term that I had from my thesis because Abbas was kind of talking about what's going on with comedians, and I have two terms, and I just deal with the one. I call it comedians who uh, they don't really have an affinity for the Muslim community outside of what it will get them in Hollywood.
Yeah.
So I call them Muslim and name comedians. I call them minks. MINC. A lot of minks out there.
That's the official term. It was in your thesis, right? That makes it
It's the
pretty
first
official.
laugh from Irfan.
What?
Got a lot of minks out there, brother. MINCs. You have people who are like, they were with us, and then it's like, oh, Hollywood gave me a shot. Now I don't know you. You see that all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And it's not, we don't want anything from you, bro, but okay, it's good. You got your show, but you can't erase our existence. You're not the only Muslim. You're not
Yeah.
the only Muslim comedian. You're not the only Muslim rapper. I mean, what is that about?
Yeah.
So really the curriculum for this comedy record label is in a very, very open way, very, very public way. I love myself as a Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a record, here's a CD, or here's a stream where you can listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's unadulterated. It's not watered down. You know, you hear stories about rappers who sell a 500,000 units and the album's a failure, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm like, he didn't go platinum.
That's
We Muslim.
crazy. Calling that a
I'm not
failure.
selling. Look, I'm not trying to sell a 500,000 records to go platinum. Let me
Yeah.
spell. Let me sell 25,000 units, and I can go ood.
Yeah. Take
I'm
that. We would go in the
This
corner and
trying to
burn
go.
it.
I'm
this
trying to
old
go frankincense.
Just hand me a miswak. I don't need a golden bowl.
That's it. That's right. Well, I'm trying to go mishwak. Yeah, there you go.
Oh
How many records sell? 1,000. Oh, we went Sunni. All right.
man.
Mhm.
Oh man, that's exciting, man. I'm so glad that we got a chance to chop it up. I mean, you and I, we've met before in the prison. I was really blessed to be able to join you on one of those prison trips.
Yeah, man.
Got to do an Eid event over there, and
It was
just like
hilarious,
throughout the
wasn't it?
years, and that was
That's
some that was really something because it was yeah,
Give
Imam
us
Qadir, Imam Abu Qadir
yeah.
Al-Amin, and Amir Suleiman, and it was you, and I was just tagging along for the ride. I'll never forget that.
It was just fun, man.
well, this was in the Bay
Absolutely.
Area?
This was I think it was in Vacaville,
In
Fairfield.
Oh,
Rockville.
oh wow. So
Amir,
give
no, Amir wasn't there though.
Was it Fairfield? I feel like it was somewhere up in that area on
No,
the
it
way
was
up to
it was, it
Sacramento.
was Rockville, but it was me, you, uh, Imam Abu Qadir, man. Allah be pleased with him.
I mean,
Yeah, Abu came, and it's hilarious. He came. Remember, he had two shows.
Uh,
So the first show was like, I don't know, 80 Muslims. Remember the guy that he kept passing out those Kit Kats while I was trying to perform? I asked him 2 times, stop passing out the Kit Kat.
somebody had Kit Kats in
he
prison?
was
Yeah,
just
exactly.
excited to spread the joy. That's all.
He was like, here's a Kit Kat. Here's a Kit Kat. I'm like, dude, I'm trying to perform. Here's a Kit Kat. I said, if you keep it up, you're going to be in the show. And he said something. I said, you know what? Stand inside of the stage with those Kit Kats don't move. I said, now you're in the nation of Islam. You're in the fruit of Islam. I tell you when
Oh
you're in the
man.
prison, picking fights. And then the second show was really, really good. I think I had like about 160 dudes, about 180 dudes. It was good.
Yeah, we got to sit down and break bread with them and eat with them, and
Broke
alhamdulillah, it
bread
was
with them.
a
Yeah, it
powerful,
was funny
powerful
because
experience.
we had the two shows. And after the first show, I kept hearing, do not wear your shoes in the window.
That's the one line that always stays years after hearing the special. I might not remember all the jokes, but I'll always remember that line.
I'm blessed with that one classic joke. I think that might be the
Classic.
first classic Muslim joke that stands 50
Yeah,
years from now. Somebody's
seriously.
gonna go.
Seriously. That's yeah, man. And then
I
even
was in
even
Milwaukee.
huh?
I was in Milwaukee with my brother. We were eating breakfast. So a Muslim brother. I'm like, hey, assalamu alaikum. He goes, wait a minute. African American, wait a minute. Do not wear your shoes. I'm like, do not talk about voodoo in front of all these white people, man. We're trying to do
I'm talking about that voodoo.
like we're in Denny's. We're in Denny's.
Like the next time they want a Muslim to go on television to defend Islam, I hope they call me. I'm gonna be on Fox News with Sean Hannity. This is what like, Preacher Moss, we know you're a Muslim comedian. We don't care about that. What can you tell us about Muslim terrorism? I'm gonna say, sir, I can't tell you a thing about Muslim terrorism. But I can tell you this. Do not wear your shoes in the voodoo area.
What do you think of that guy Ali Sadek or Ali
The,
Siddiq? What do you think
man,
of?
he's the truth, man.
He's pretty good.
He's excellent, man.
Mm.
At one point, he was really, really interested in trying to join Allah Made Me Funny.
Oh wow.
And I watched what he was doing then for comedy, he's not doing now. Um, but he had a very unique voice even back then. And we talk often.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
Yeah, that's one thing I was gonna ask you. Like,
like
who are
his,
some of the younger people that you think are on a good or
keep,
who you
keep your
like?
eye on keep your eye on Yasmin Al Hadi from the females.
Mm-hmm.
There's another sister named Nadira Pierre. There's some sisters out in New York. They're okay, but they're not. I don't think they're close enough to the community to kind of get that kind of love. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have Omar Regan. I think more so than Omar and I really want to keep an eye on Moses the comic.
Moses the comic, yep.
Yeah, keep an eye on Moses the comic because he's making some moves in Philly that I don't think a lot of people are seeing. He did this one thing, and I just happened to see it on a clip. And this is a guy you travel with, you know him for a bunch of years.
Mm-hmm.
It could be said he'll tell you he helped get me in the business of Muslim comedy because he was doing mainstream stuff when I met him. Right? He had an event that was almost like a social mixer for um, adult men and women with developmental disabilities,
Mm.
right? And in the interview, he's like, "My brother has." I'm like, "Oh, he never told me." I mean, I have a cousin who has
Wow.
a developmental, and when I'm like that right there, I'm looking at that. I'm like, "Yo, that right there made a lot of smile right there."
Yeah.
I'm like, and it was just low key, like he's not putting it on blast, and I think the city came out, but he could have done anything, and for his own benefit. I'm like, that was the spirit of Allah Made Me Funny. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
that was like that's what makes that thing legendary because it's like we would show up, man. We showed up a lot of places.
Mm-hmm. And that
The
goes
first
to the
year,
spirit of the role of the artist in the community as well. It's like you're not just out here trying to put out a product and make a buck and call it a job. Like
I could have done that.
beyond that.
I could have done that 8 or 9 times. I could have not put comedians on,
Mm-hmm.
or worse, I could have compromised what the visibility was. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Just to get that paycheck.
yeah. I remember Hassan Minhaj's father came out to an event in Sacramento,
Mm-hmm.
Care Sacramento. He bought Hassan Minhaj. He wanted us to talk him out of doing comedy.
Wow, when was this?
Oh, gee, 2000.
Wow.
I mean, was this like because I know Hassan and I started off doing all these MSA YouTube videos when he was living in Davis, so it must have been a short drive from Davis to Sacramento, thinking that
Yeah,
they could get his mind changed.
yeah, they were trying to get him. Then my son wants to do comedy, and I'm like,
Well, clearly it
"What?"
worked.
Yeah, he was like, "Man, hey man, do your thing." I mean, because I'm like, dude, you're a grown man. You're not 12 years old. What do I look like? I'm like, do your thing. And then he got with, I think we got with Barry Katz Management. That was the only time I was ever worried about him. I was like, I don't know if you know about Barry Katz, bro. Um, but I was like, yo, you doing anything? When he got the Daily Show, I reached out. He's like a real dude, man.
Mm,
And maybe that's the thing that maybe it's a awry in Muslim comedy. Like we don't have enough real dudes. Like you just as good, you're good for the joke. You know what I mean?
mm. But then off stage, who are you really? And that's one of the things I love about like people who truly like stand out in my mind. Azar Usman off stage, very warm, very spiritually grounded, very, like of the people. I think about like Dave Chappelle off stage, he's gathering all these artists out there in Ohio. He's really like behind the scenes fostering a lot of great Muslim artistry. You know what I mean? He had that vinyl special with Amir Suleiman. Like there's certain people that yeah, they may be stars on stage, but you really get to know them off stage and you really
Well,
get to experience them off stage, and then that's a whole
I've
other
experienced some
dimension.
of them off stage, bro. It ain't that flowery.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they keep all the
But
magic for the stage, and after that it's just
I'll give you a Hassan Minhaj story. I talk about being a real dude because we have a lot of guys at park. I'm this that. You really not like
yeah.
the game. I learned a long time ago. I was playing basketball one time, right?
Hmm.
And it was pretty competitive court, and you knew who the ballers were. And I remember this guy who was just trying to get attention, shooting. Give me a chance, And he's trying to who runs the court? Nobody runs the court. We play ball here. And somebody told him, oh, the big dog is over there. And, sit down. And he walks over to this dude. It's cold blooded. He's like, you know who I am? The guy's like, what? He goes, you know who I am? He goes, I don't know who you are. He said, but if you were somebody, he said, the streets would have told me before you did.
Ah,
Mm.
that's a line right there, man.
But
That's
a
beautiful.
great Hassan Minhaj story is he still had Patriot Act, right?
Yeah.
And it's right around George Floyd.
Hmm.
So he was in Minnesota, Minneapolis to tape the show, and he was with Keith Ellison. So at this point, Keith Ellison was Attorney General, the state of Minnesota, right?
Hmm.
And he's like, "Come on, Keith, let's make a dua together." And he and Keith were making dua, and some way during the dua, he starts kind of clowning during the dua. "Ola, bring back, lime flavored Doritos," and you know, and he's got. So I get a call. Some OG's like, "Do you know this cat?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "Yo, hey man, we don't appreciate it." When you hear that, I'm like, "It's not good." Like they talk like it's on site. You know what I mean? We see him on site, and I'm like, "Hey, listen, we're not doing no on-site stuff. He's a young dude. That's my dude. Let me go holler at him." And literally went to. I called him. I did a show about it, and I'm like, "Hey, man, this is America. It's people really just hanging on to their dean." You know what I mean? That when I called him and I told him what was up, the brother called me and we had a great conversation, like real dudes do. You know what I mean?
And then he stopped making duas about Doritos.
We talked about jokes, and we talked about it. He was like, you know what, I'm like, I don't really make jokes about Dawaz, bro. He was like, oh, it wasn't really finished. I'm like, you know what, man, you a good dude. I said, but it's just some things, we ain't, you can kind of let them go. You know what I mean? Just just leave them be. Just leave them be, man. And we got into this great conversation, man. And that's a solid dude, man. That's a ten toes down dude, man. I really like him.
Big things coming from him, inshallah. You saying?
Huh?
You're saying big things coming from him, inshallah, in the future. Keep our eyes on that.
Hey, man, I don't know. The game is weird.
Game is weird. The game is the game.
The game is weird, man. Like the pimp say, people act funny for the money and strange for the change, right?
And I can't think of a better closing line than that.
Hey, man, thank you guys so much for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Artistic Foodies. Before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts.
Be sure to find us on Facebook and Instagram to stay tuned for more episodes as well as bonus content. You can also have access to all of our episodes at theartisticfoodies.com.
This podcast has been brought to you by HalalFest Incorporated and GAMA, Gathering All Muslim Artists.